But let me welcome a very warm welcome to all our participants on the 6th Adaptation Pipeline Accelerator webinar. I think we still have people joining us, but we want to just make sure we make a good use of everyone's time. We are basically going to record this webinar, and we'd also like to let you know that interpretation is available in French and Spanish. The webinar is very much part of the Adaptation Pipeline Accelerator initiative of the Secretary General, which is really focusing on accelerating adaptation action and ensuring that adaptation planning is being connected to development of investments as well as pipelines. And this is an initiative that started last year. And as part of this initiative, UNDP has been organizing a series of global exchanges with partners to facilitate exchange of information and experiences on accelerating adaptation and exploring available tools and resources. So the webinar today is focusing on the governance of climate adaptation. According to the IPCC, there is growing public and political awareness of climate impacts and risks, and it has resulted in at least 170 countries, including adaptation in their nationally determined contributions, climate policies, and planning processes. While governance for climate change adaptation, including on policies, procedures, and institutions, differs across countries, it is one of the key factors in ensuring implementation of climate policies and enabling climate resilient development. And in turn, and governance also includes financing mechanisms and the mainstreaming of climate risks across planning and budgeting. And the issue of finance in general is one of the major gaps in adaptation planning, and that's also one of the topics we'll tackle in today's webinar. We have 4 distinguished speakers who will help us unpack various aspects of this adaptation governance. In the first part, we will focus on policies and monitoring and evaluation frameworks. And we're very happy to have a distinguished speaker from Moldova, because Moldova has adopted a new national climate change adaptation program and its action plan in 2023, and has adopted a climate action law. And Germany has adopted its first ever climate adaptation law in 2023. And a new adaptation strategy is expected later this year. So the first part, we will actually focus on these presentations. And then the second part, we are going to focus on very interesting presentations from the angle of finance. So I think, and also just to reinforce that the work that countries are doing along policy and planning includes monitoring and evaluation and learning frameworks, which are relevant for the ongoing discussions related to the global goal for adaptation and beyond. So, so there are multiple linkages. So we have our 4 speakers, and let me say that each of them has 10 minutes for the intervention, and there is time for Q&A and discussion. And I'd like to actually welcome our very first speaker as part of our part 1 adaptation policy cycle and monitoring evaluation learning frameworks. Very, very happy to have Dr. Aliona Rushnak, who will be presenting the Climate Change Adaptation Program of the Republic of Moldova. She is a State Secretary of the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Moldova and is also the Associate Professor at the Department for Private Law at the Faculty of Law and is a lawyer. She has a lot of experience in implementing international projects and is a member of several working groups to amend legislation in the field of climate resilience and has published in many, many scientific articles. So with that, I would actually I'm going to turn to Dr. Aliona, and I'm also going to request that if participants have any questions as the presentations move on, please do share them in the chat, and we'll try to deal with them in the course of the webinar. So I think with that, let me hand over to Dr. Aliona for her presentation.
Rohini, I'm sorry. I think our speaker from Moldova hasn't yet joined, so perhaps we could move to the second speaker. Sorry.
Okay, no problem. So actually, while we wait for Dr. Aliona, I'd like to actually go to our next speaker. I just wanted to, just before I introduce her, I just want to make sure, Dr. Cornelia Rietov, are you online and can you hear us?
I'm online, yes.
Excellent, thank you. So let me have the pleasure of introducing Cornelia Ridroff, who is a scientific associate for international reporting, knowledge transfer on adaptation to climate change impacts, and evaluation at the Competence Center Climate Impacts and Adaptation Compass within the German Environment Agency. She has a background in Asian sciences and environmental politics of China, as well as environment and development studies, and has worked in Asia and East Africa on topics such as the economics of climate change, poverty risk reduction, portfolio management, and climate adaptation and monitoring and evaluation with GIZ. And Cornelia will be presenting Germany's national adaptation planning process. And without further ado, I would like to hand over to you for your presentation, Cornelia.
Thank you very much. Yeah, let me share my screen. And yeah, thank you and your colleagues from UNDP already for inviting us, and yeah, your interest in our current developments. So just let me know if you see the presentation.
Yeah, it might take a second. We just wait. Mm-hmm. I think I'm not yet able to see it.
Yeah, let me share. Now it should be. Now I see some. So it tells me it's shared, but okay, let me.
Yes, I think we can see it
Yeah.
now. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. Please
Okay.
go ahead. Yeah.
Perfect. So apologies firsthand. So we tried in previous to this webinar. So unfortunately, my video is not working. So, but yeah, as you're seeing the presentation now, mainly, yeah, I hope it's okay. But still, very sorry that you can't see me. You can just see me in the speaker's notes. But yeah. Let's start. So as already announced, so our new climate change adaptation law was announced last year. So all the different political parties agreed to it, and it was published or became into act actually this Monday, so in July. So we have a lot of press going on at the moment. And yeah, in my presentation, I will touch upon our policy cycle, about the climate adaptation law, and our latest monitoring report, and how it will change with the new climate law, and our currently in development or yeah, our precautionary climate change adaptation strategy, which is currently under development. Okay, let me move to the next slide. Yeah. So here you see, hopefully, the slide changed our policy cycle for climate change adaptation processes in Germany. And in the very center, there is the new climate change adaptation law. And our new precautionary adaptation strategy, which is still in a different color and in italic because it's not published yet, but will be published by the end of this year. And our cycle starts with the climate risk assessment, which always identifies the most pressing climate risks for Germany. And once those are identified, an adaptation action plan is being developed, which then lists all the different measures trying to reduce our vulnerability towards the most pressing issues. And with the new adaptation strategy, we for the first time will also have measurable targets, and those will be then also integrated or are currently being integrated into the next adaptation action plan. Once the plan is ready, we have a 4-year cycle of implementation of adaptation measures. We have an ongoing monitoring, and the evaluation then usually also comes in a 4-year cycle. And with our new strategy, we are also reviewing the methodology of our evaluation linked to the new measurable targets. On the next slide, which hopefully comes visible for you as well soon, is the national adaptation in Germany. And there you see the whole process. I won't spend much time on the slide. It's we had our first adaptation strategy in 2008, followed by an adaptation action plan in 2011. And then every 4 years, we had progress reports, including new adaptation action plans. And yeah, as just mentioned, by the end of this year, we'll have the precautionary national adaptation strategy, including the new adaptation action plan with measurable targets and indicators. And then since 2015, we also do a climate risk analysis. So far we have 2. The latest one is from 2021. And the next one will be available in 2028. So we start with the planning now, and yeah, but already have a quite established methodology. And our monitoring reporting is also since 2015, every 4 years. And the latest one was just published by the end of last year. And the English version is available since April. And there's a link on one of the latest slides. The presentation will be shared. So yeah, you can also then click on the link and see the report in detail. For the evaluation, the next one is planned for 2028 and will also envisions to develop a monitoring and evaluation reporting and learning framework to really yeah, put on paper and yeah, for everyone accessible and for common knowledge how the different processes are linked to each other, how data is flowing, and what roles and responsibilities the different agencies, ministries, and actors in Germany have in the whole monitoring evaluation cycle, to have more clarity and a clear data plan as well. And yeah, then just now in July, we published the National Climate Change Adaptation Law. And more on the law is now on the next 2 slides. This climate adaptation law is for us actually the first binding framework for climate adaptation in Germany. And at the heart of it is that the Federal Republic has to create the precautionary climate adaptation strategy with measurable targets, indicators, and yeah, shared responsibilities with all the different federal ministries. It also has in it that we have to do a regular evaluation of the progress based on data and results of the monitoring report every 4 years, that we have to do regular climate risk assessments, which soon, it's also something we currently develop, is a register of damages and expenditure. And yeah, the federal states have to develop own climate adaptation strategies, also looking down to municipalities, down to the level of municipalities who then should develop local climate adaptation concepts and report to the federal government. And yeah, then on the next slide is just zooming into the, for us at the agency, also important articles of the law. Is the first one is the development of the precautionary climate change adaptation strategy. And that's under the lead of the Ministry of Environment and supported by our German Environment Agency. It also says that the federal states and associations, as well as the public, must be involved in the definition of the targets. So we had a very extensive participatory process, and the ministries themselves are responsible for, now we already started developing it, we're responsible for developing, reviewing, and if necessary, updating their targets and measures. So also as to gain a sense of ownership. It's not mandated by the Ministry of Environment or like one ministry, but each ministry has to be involved in defining the targets. And then the monitoring report will inform about climate impacts and state of target achievement. So also integrate those new measurable targets. And just a bit about the process of the development. So all of this started mid-end of 2022 when the concept of the law and the concept of the strategy was developed by the Ministry of Environment and our agency, and the interministerial working group on adaptation accepted the suggested process. And then in end of 2022 towards end of 2023, the development of the targets started. And the participatory process, so the everything circled in red here, has been with a citizen dialogue, also focusing on feedback of use. Then there were consultation of stakeholder sessions in 5 regions of Germany in the course of the end of last year. And joint working groups of federal states and federal ministries reviewing the draft targets and suggesting further ones if they saw it was needed. And currently the draft strategy is being reviewed. There will be, once the draft is agreed by the different ministries, there will be another consultation process just after the summer. And then we hope to have the strategy ready by the end of this year. Here on this slide, just a bit of background for the measurable targets. Most of this I already mentioned, but yeah, the Climate Adaptation Act is really the basis. It mandated us to do develop the new strategy. We overall have 6 clusters on water, infrastructure, health, and others, which are spearheaded by different ministries. And per cluster, they were required to develop 3 to 5 measurable targets with terminated indicators. And also add 2 to 3 effective policy instruments and measures, to then later on being able to assess what has been achieved and where we need to do changes. And now just finally, a few insights into our monitoring report. Here you also see the link at the end of the slide. So our monitoring report contains 117 indicators split over 16 fields of action, like water, land use, forestry, and so on. You will see it in the monitoring report. It has state indicators showing the development of Germany's climate over time. It has impact indicators showing the change of climate change effects on natural and socioeconomic systems. And it has a set of response indicators which try to show how do we act and what are the outcomes. And with this last monitoring report, there were new indicators added, looking into the most pressing risks identified by the last climate risk assessment. And yeah, they were integrated into that. Going to the, to this slide. So it's also a revised structure of the report and with a simplified findability of various elements of the report. It has a summary for each field of action. It has a summary of the results from indicator-based monitoring, a brief summary of the climate risk assessment findings. It shows data and knowledge gaps, which we still encounter, and has a qualitative presentation of what is happening at federal level with regard to adaptation. And then there's also a QR code linking to more in-depth data information, for in case users are interested in the data backing all of that. And now on the last slide, it's just like a quick snapshot of the beginning of the report. There's an overview of all the different indicators we have for, like a quick finder to get to specific indicators of interest. And overall, we have 67 impact indicators, 45 response indicators, and then 5 cross-sectional indicators, which is like manageability of climate change impacts, things linked to finance and others. So yeah, this is a quick insight into our policy cycle in adaptation, and giving back to the group and for questions, or I don't know how we proceed here. But thank you very much for listening.
Excellent. Great. That's a great presentation. Thank you so much. I think that really gives a very good insight into how the new adaptation strategy of Germany is being developed, and also the legal basis for actually enforcing or implementing the sort of precautionary adaptation system. So thank you so much, Cornelia, for that. And I would request that people who are online that may have any questions, they can start putting them in the chat, and then we can deal with them, after this segment. I'd actually like to now call on Dr. Aliona Rushnak. Dr. Aliona, I want to check if you can hear me, and if you're online.
I can. Yes,
Excellent.
I can hear. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
I cannot open the camera, but it's okay. I'm fine with that. Only talking.
Excellent. No. Welcome to the webinar. I did introduce you already before you joined us, but just to again introduce you, you're the State Secretary for the Ministry of Environment of the Republic of Moldova, and an associate professor at the Department of Private Law, Faculty of Law and Lawyer, with great experience in implementing international projects, and a member of several working groups. And you're Dr. Aliona, you're going to be presenting Climate Change Adaptation Program of the Republic of Moldova. So we really look forward to your presentation, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. If someone can put the presentation on, I'm talking from my phone, so it will be good if you can help me technically. While you put on the presentation, I would like to thank you for presenting me, and we're going directly to the slide number 2 to facilitate the discussions. I have here in the webinar my colleague Marina Lungu, and she will help me too, with the Q&A sessions, as I do have other commitments too. Okay, so I would like to start with the fact that the Republic of Moldova is really good advancing in climate change adaptation programs. We have been very successful in adopting the climate action law on 11 April 2024. It's been a very wanted and very expected law by the environment domain and by all other domains, because it clarifies the aspects on adaptation, on mitigation, and on all aspects, but also on monitoring and verification. So basically, the climate action enabling the low carbon development and climate resilience, and establishing a long-term objective in its climate neutrality by 2050. Also, I would like to mention that the law is not yet in force. It will be in force in November 2025, but nevertheless, we're working really hard on other domains, because we have several very good and very comprehensive acts. So this is, I would like to mention the National Program for Adaptation on Climate Change until 2030, that I will emphasize a bit later on. It was approved last year in September, and nevertheless, we already started to implement it and to approach the cross-sectorial mainstreaming and relevant sectoral policies. Also, a big step ahead in order to implement the National Adaptation Climate Change Program was the adoption of the government decision on National Commission on Climate Change. It's formed of the ministers, Minister of Environment, Energy, Infrastructure and Regional Development, Health, Agriculture. So the key sectors, and the chair under the chairman of the Prime Minister. So basically, these are the three main aspects that help us to advance very well in adaptation program, and in general to comprehensively and to emphasize from all sectors. Please, next slide. So basically, the Republic of Moldova has a very good, and I will be really short on the history, engaged in NAP processes 2013. The NCACP, the National Program 2030, builds on the first climate change adaptation strategy, and action was first in 2014-2020. But nevertheless, all the cross-sectorial issues were identified during its implementation, and basically the current program emphasized the cross-sectorial issues that were not addressed before, and they are so important to address now. It contributes to the implementation of a Moldova international commitments, and yeah, here I would like to say that assumed under the Paris Agreement, Global Agenda 2030, and the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. I would say that here the National Adaptation Program, it includes several issues on the disaster risk management reduction, but now we're in the process of developing a disaster risk management strategy that will include the key sectors that will work on that. I'll not stop on that because, you know, the program objectives are also included in the NDC Moldova 2030. It's ensure the coherent planning on concrete climate change adaptation measures. And I would like to mention the 6 priority sectors, which my colleague, my previous speaker from Germany mentioned. We're also focusing on the key sectors. This is agriculture, water resources, public health, forestry, energy, and transport. Of course, it is in terms of these cross-sectorial sectors, we avoid duplications of actions. We're streamlining the resources. We're ensuring integrated climate change international and local development programs. Really important because with the help of UNDP, we developed several adaptation programs at the local level, and this is, you know, going from the central and from the local level, which is really important. Okay, next slide, please. This is really shortly on the NCCP development, and I think I mentioned already the most important. I just add here that the program and its action plan develop inclusive process of consultation with the stakeholders, taking into account the recommendations from previously. Please, next slide. I would stop a bit on the structure and the climate risk context, on the policy context, on the vision and strategy objectives for adaptation and then development on action plan. For sure, by ensure the NAP, the NCCP 2030 provides the creation and strengthening of National Adaptation Program monitoring and evaluation framework. We are basing on gender-sensitive indicators with the aim to improve the collecting and distribution of data relevant on climate change adaptation. Obviously, we take into account the climate risk and vulnerabilities economical sectors, and this is really important to tackle the cross-sectorial, you know, and we are in very tight discussions with all the ministers. And I would like to emphasize that now I'm currently at the Interministerial Energy Community Council with my colleague from the Ministry of Energy. We have very good discussions with the Minister of Agriculture, sensitive issues on the water resources. So all this, you know, the National Adaptation Program are including, and which is really important that we emphasize on monitoring and reporting. You know, when the ministers has to report on their domain, and we're working on clearing the data and providing the real and feasible data. So basically, the action plan, climate change adaptation and timely decision making in interdisciplinary policy area. This is a key priority for us. If you see here, we have a climate change awareness, knowledge gaps. We have legal and strategic framework. We have institutional and stakeholder framework. All these have a common goal to emphasize and to involve all the sectors and to adopt all the sectors depending on the key and sensitive elements of the energy, for example, key and sensitive issues of the agriculture, of the infrastructure, and others. This is really important to mention that we are basically ensuring a coherent and planning of climate change adaptation measures. And in the action plan, it is included the facilitation and implementation on the short term, on medium term, and on long term. And this is the next slide. I'm kind of going ahead the machine. Yeah. So in the long-term vision, we have to adapt to the impact of real and potential climate change in all sectors, and to reduce the vulnerability and increase their resilience to effect on these changes. We have 4 horizontal goals specified, and this is specifically targeting on cross-cutting issues, also targeting increasing resilience in the 6 priority sectors in agriculture, energy, forestry, health, transport, and water. And we have courses action. This is 12 horizontal action, 12 horizontal and vertical actions that need to be implemented. Why I would like the next slide actually emphasize the objectives that we are so targeted. Especially, it's a policy enforcement and capacity building for climate change adaptation. It's strengthening the knowledge base and awareness raising, improving budgeting for climate change adaptation. And I would say on this issue, we're advancing quite well. However, the long climate action will enter in force in 2025, November. But starting from this year, we already have the first exercise on involving the Minister of Environment in the law and budget, and the Minister of Environment will work with the Minister of Finance on budget tagging and see the key sectors that might be affected by environment. So basically, this is a really good example when having everything set in the National Adaptation Program, having everything set in the long climate action, and I'm meaning in the legal base. When you have a solid legal base, it's really easy to interact with our ministers. So this is a very good example. And honestly, we saw an openness from the Ministry of Finance in terms of discussion already on the environment projects, the environment laws, environment policies. So this is, a very good example. And I strongly advise you to take example of, of our country, of other countries and other speakers. I'm sure that they will show you wonderful experience. And thank you for letting us, giving us the possibility to talk. Increasing resilience in priority sectors, I already mentioned on this, on the in the horizontal, vertical goals. So this is, I will not stop here. Next slide is the cost estimation and CCAP. Also, I will not stop the PowerPoint presentation will be sent. Already said it will be presented, and we would be more than happy to share our contacts, and we are very happy to have a short presentation with each country bilateral, and me and Marina, will help you, in transposing and avoiding the mistakes we committed. Yeah. Last slide. This is the next slide. This is a monitoring, reporting, and evaluation. I'd like to say that the National Climate Change Commission provide the institutional framework on the monitoring, reporting, and evaluation in collaboration with central public authorities, private sector, and civil society, that allows us to have a core umbrella commission that actually involves the technical groups and help us to understand, the sensitive moments. For example, if there is a moment in the energy environment, we create, according to the NCC government decision, we can create a technical group, and then they submit the proposal to the commission. This is a really intersectoral discussions and bringing on board private sector and civil society. Implementation monitoring and carried out by the Ministry of Environment. This is periodical evaluation, the degree of achievement of indicators objectives. This is done directly through the reporting or indirectly through the reporting submitted by the depending on the beneficiaries or the reporting stakeholders. We have annual progress report and evaluation reports, intermediate evaluation we have 2023-2026, final evaluation we will have, and we have proposed indicators contained in 3 results. So macro, which have a cumulative impact of the national level that will include all ministers, what they have to do. As I make like a joke that all the ministers have their homework, they have to work hard on their homework, and then the Minister of Environment and the NCCC, of course, as a part of the CCC, will have an eye on the results. We have the outcomes, meso as it's called, sectorial district level, and micro we have output level and project and programs. Well, thank you for your attention. I try to be really short and to leave more room for questions and discussions. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alina. That was a very exciting presentation, and it had many aspects to it. Institutional aspects, all the technical aspects of the risk assessments, and also, the issue of monitoring. So I think you've given us a very comprehensive picture of Moldova. I wanted to ask you, are you here for another few minutes? Because we believe you have another commitment. If we can pose one question to you.
Yeah, sure. I'm here.
Okay,
yeah,
and
yeah.
So actually, I think that what I'd like to actually pose to you is that regarding the indicators, we know that there's quite a challenge with adaptation indicators, and I think we have one question from our audience, which is actually regarding the integration by the biodiversity actions and strategic plans. So because this climate adaptation and biodiversity issues are interrelated, the question is, have there been any specific consultations or any discussion to make sure these topics are being looked at for the monitoring frameworks and the indicators? So that's one part of the question. And the second part is kind of related. It's touching my question. How has been the experience of defining these adaptation indicators? We understand it's quite challenging, and any light you can shed from Moldova's experience will be very useful for the audience. Over.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for the questions. Of course, this is in general the process. The indicators that were collected and helped by the experts. Of course, when we on each sector they were involved different key experts that have the experience on targeting the indicators, and targeting the indicators that contain, the free results. Well, firstly, we started with the fact, how the indicators are influencing at the national level, because the national level, it included the result, at the national country, and the indicators showed exactly, the move of the country. Yeah, but what is really important, the result from by sector, so by regional, by district level, this is important, and I know it from our own experience, because and even since the adoption of the National Adaptation Program, we saw, how the movements are and how the projects are coming in order to improve the sector. For example, in agriculture, there are more and more sectors, especially in resilience. And what is really important, because the ministers are working exactly to achieve the target included in the indicator. Yeah, like for example, in agriculture, in energy. So this is really important, that the movement of their actions are taken in order to achieve and to not, to really, to really get the right result. I would say like that. Yeah. So this is
really important when you establish at the beginning national, meso, or result of the sector, regional and micro. This is really important that at the end you'll have the whole picture and you'll see exactly where is the gap, the problem. And especially in biodiversity, thank you for this, we have a very you know that we have an afforestation program which involves national and local, because there are involved the private sector and the local authorities, you know, that work on this afforestation program. This is one example of this, because we are working on the emerald zone, on other sectors that actually brings and facilitate the first the discussion, second to the achievement of the target. So this is really important to establish the right approach of the indicator, because the indicator actually shows how you achieved there, yeah, how you got there, how it is really important and feasible to get the result. So this is really important, and for monitoring and evaluation, it's easy when you have the correct indicator, and it's not only on national level, but when you have on sectorial level, on the projects and program level, that it's much easier to understand how you acted rightly. And I would like to say that you know, this is really important, and yeah, to get it. I hope I answered to the question.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much, Dr. Aluna, because I think these insights you're providing are very critical to understand for the implementation of adaptation actions and outcomes. And I think you've touched on many aspects of this. And it's also critical insights also for the global goal for adaptation discussions, which, you know, all countries are also looking at. So it links to the, you know, adaptation action, but also the monitoring, which is a critical part. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to turn to our other panelists. If I might turn to you, Cornelia. So I think there's several questions for you, but I noticed they're kind of linked up and they're again coming back to the issue of the monitoring aspect. And I think if I might just club a few questions. I see you've answered a couple of questions live, but some of the, I think, questions that have come to you are, I think one is, you know, in terms of the German adaptation law, is it mitigation or adaptation or both? That's, I think, one part of it. But the second part is actually, again, related to this monitoring and evaluation question. The question is, you know, what kind of set targets, you know, what are the adaptation targets looking like for Germany? What level are they set? You know, what do you see as the gaps, you know, in terms of the monitoring of adaptation action, you know, and how to really measure the manageability of climate impacts. So it's a clutch of issues really, again, around monitoring. So if I might turn to you, Cornelia, for your insights on that.
Yes, thank you very much for the questions. And some are or are current questions for us as well still. So just to already say that, especially of the how to measure them is still also kind of a puzzle for us in some areas. Maybe starting with the first part, if the law also is for mitigation, no, it's really a dedicated law for, it's called climate adaptation law, and it's purely focused on this, and just giving us Ministry of Environment, the different ministries and the environment agencies strong mandate to starting to measure the targets. On the one hand, also gaining information for European governance reporting, international reporting, and all of that. So it just is a stronger mandate. Looking into also the question a colleague from Moldova also just answered, in our monitoring, we also really look to strongly interlink with colleagues and with existing other, like the biodiversity question, just how it's guidelines and other indicators existing in water management regulations, so we're in close exchange in our monitoring report. We have indicators also shared with biodiversity strategy, with water supply management. We are really looking into in some cases in the same data also linked, for example, to health. We have like heat and related deaths.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you. I think the connection is not good.
No worries. Oh, sorry. Okay. Here, I don't know what to do. Is it better now if I change the height of the microphone? I hope it's getting better because there's... Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, now it's much better, Cornelia. I think the first part of your answer we couldn't hear very well because of the connection. It was breaking off. But now I think Rohini herself
very
got
sorry.
disconnected.
Because
the are you there?
I'm so sorry, Cornelia. I think yes. It's I think it's better now. You might need to repeat the first part. Yeah. Yes, we can hear you now. We missed the first part of your answer because the connection was not too good.
Okay, so I try to be a bit more brief. So the climate adaptation law, did you hear that one? So it's really focused on adaptation. There's no mitigation in that. So there are other regulations for mitigation. It's purely for giving us a stronger mandate, helping us to gain more data for European and international reporting, and also strengthen our monitoring. Then I linked a bit to the question that what was posed to both the colleague from Moldova and me, if we're also having for monitoring are connected with colleagues from the biodiversity strategy, and also there, and also with other water strategies and other strategies. We have a very close interlinkage there, and conversations with the colleagues. And indeed, in our monitoring report, we also use some of the indicators used in the biodiversity and other strategies. Then concerning, I also saw that colleagues were asking if we can give some examples of indicators. Unfortunately, since it's still under development, we are not allowed to share like specifics yet. I can just say a bit about the process. So it was indeed challenging at the beginning, especially to get more outcome-oriented like targets and indicators, because it's very difficult to measure, and the attribution issue is of course a big question. Our experience was that it needed quite, and you also saw it's like 1.5 year progress of developing measurable targets. At the beginning, most of them were really more activity oriented on output level. But step by step, with a lot of conversations with the different ministries, we also managed to get some outcome level oriented indicators. And the next big step is now, and there we have we'll have a research project really focusing on an evaluation system and how to best measure. So unfortunately, in this webinar, we don't have like a ready-made solution yet, but it's something we're very much interested and engaged in at the moment, and also interested in more exchange. So I can keep in contact with Saran and colleagues, and once we have can share specifics of the different types of indicators, but also the evaluation questions we have, and maybe some first findings. We are very happy to share that later on, and stay in exchange also. So at the end of my presentation, there's also a link to my email address. So I also invite everyone is welcome to get in touch and maybe have some more exchange then on specifics anytime.
Thank you so much, Cornelia. Rohini, is your video working okay? The audio?
I think I'm so sorry, there's an IT malfunction. Saran, could you please take over?
Sure. Thank you so much. For Rohini is going to join us in a moment, and I'm going to be the improvised facilitator here. Thank you so much, Cornelia, for a very, very detailed answer in that regard. And hello, everyone. This is Saran, you probably all saw my name when you received the Zoom registration confirmation link. So that was part one of our discussion, which Rohini already told you will be focusing on the climate policies and the monitoring and evaluation frameworks. And we are now ready to move on to the second part of our webinar today, which will be focusing on the finance part. But as you know, this is all very much related to the governance discussion that we have been having from the beginning of this webinar. Very interesting discussions. Please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A sections. I see there are a lot of questions already. And thank you also for our speakers for not only the amazing presentations, but also answering the questions in the Q&A bar. Without further ado, may I ask Sandra, can you hear us? Our next speaker?
Yes, I can hear you, Saran. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you... Okay, now I can see you because now you unmuted yourself. So that means I can make you the co-host. And could you please try to open your video if it works?
Yes, I will. Trying to share my screen too.
Great. That means you can also share your screen. While you do that, I would be very honored to present you. Sandra Freitas, welcome and thank you so much for joining us today. Sandra is the CEO and founder of Sustainable Solutions for Africa, and she is also the Senior Climate Finance Advisor to the Africa Adaptation Initiative. She has over 20 years of experience in climate change diplomacy, policy formulation, analysis, implementation, working with over 50 countries around the world, Asia, Africa, Pacific, SIDS. So a lot of experience here. And she has also been managing international teams, testing innovative implementation strategies. And she was previously also worked in the GCF in South Korea. And she was also the director of the Climate Analytics Office in Togo. Sandra, thank you so much for being with us today. And you are here to share with us some of the findings of the State of Adaptation in Africa report. I am very confident that we can fill the entire webinar with this amazing report. We will share the link in the chat for those of you who are not familiar. But today, Sandra will be focusing on the finance part of the report. So without further ado, over to you, Sandra. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Saran. It's a great pleasure for us to participate in this webinar. Indeed, as you explain it, we will be discussing the critical issue of adaptation finance in Africa, as we highlighted in the State of Adaptation reports, the 2023 edition, which was the inaugural version of a project that will be bringing us to develop every 2 years a State of Adaptation report. As you also clearly indicated, these presentations will shed light on the finding on the report, focusing on the challenge of mobilizing adaptation finance for Africa, trying to explore innovative options to accelerate adaptation finance across the continent. The State of Adaptation report has this singular overarching aim, which is to develop a deep reservoir of knowledge that is authentically African and relevant to our continent-specific adaptation needs. The report set out several key objectives: to articulate Africa goals on adaptation, to construct a compelling African narrative on contentious issues, to highlight gaps in our climate information system and propose solutions, to mobilize the private sector in accelerating adaptation efforts, and to align our strategies with the global stocktake. Here you will see the outline of the report itself, which begins with an assessment of climate risk in Africa, followed by a detailed look at how climate change impacts economic and livelihood. Then the report examines the effect of climate change on critical sectors like agriculture, health, infrastructure, etc. And strategy around key pillars. We look specifically in this report on financial needs, and today our presentation will be highlighting some of our findings. And at this point, I want to have an emphasis on two key points. The first one would be the criticality of investing in adaptation everywhere, in particular in Africa, which is presented as the most vulnerable continent. And in this case, we analyze the cost of investing compared to the cost of inaction, not investing. Right. One of the sector critical that require urgent financing would be the agricultural sectors because of the losses expected in this sector. Without adaptation, climate change is expected to cause agricultural productivity losses ranging from 5% to 30% by 2050. This is critical since the sector constitutes a large part of Africa GDP still and employs a significant portion of its population. When we break down in the AFOLO sectors, the cost of investing in different components against the cost of inaction, you can see the wide difference. For water management, it ranged for 6.1 billion needs to pay for adaptation against 90.7 for not doing anything. In land restoration, for example, it cost 3.4 billion to invest in adaptation against 27 billion of not doing anything. And the spillover effect of those curves across the entire economy, where climate change could reduce Africa GDP by up to 15% by 2030 due to impact on this sector associated to other, which is related to agriculture, including infrastructure and health. The cost of inaction will also touch sectors like health, social impact, infrastructure. They are associated to economic cost of drought, loss of productivity, loss of biodiversity and ecosystem services, displacement and migration, impact associated to the energy sectors, as well as increased cost of disaster responses. So this is one of the key findings we identify, and indicating the need for urgent measure to finance adaptation as critical interventions. The second point of attention is about how to scale up adaptation investment in Africa and the role of the financial instrument. Traditionally, loans and grants has been used to finance adaptation in Africa, with questions being posed around the quality of the investment using loan. We want to emphasize here that these investments for adaptation are necessary, especially grants, and in some cases, loan might be justified, but both have shown some sort of limits, right? For grant, for example, they are appropriate for feasibility study, pilot project, capacity building, providing financial support to vulnerable community, act as a seed funding to attract more capital, support policy development, regulatory framework, and strengthening. They are good to support some short-term specific projects, but they have found, for example, the limits in investing in scale intervention. They might not be necessarily relevant to promote financial sustainability beyond the grant period, and in some cases might create dependency. In the case of senior loan that also have been used for adaptation in Africa, they are relevant for large-scale adaptation projects, including infrastructure. They are important in mobilizing private sector participation, de-risking projects with concessionality. They are good in creating greater ownership, and they can provide substantial capital over extended period for long-term projects. And the challenge here is how do you scale up beyond grant and beyond loan? The reports look at some recommendations, especially looking at blended finance approaches, combining grant, senior loan, and if needed, other financial instruments to maximize impact. Enhanced debt management capability to mitigate risk with associated loan, improve creditworthiness through policy reform and better economic management, and explore innovative financial mechanisms like climate or resilient bonds and impact investing. So several innovative finance are being discussed today. And while all of them are relevant for the specific case and specific usage, it always poses the problem of the role of the most domestic private sector. So today, blended finance, as I discussed previously, it's important to strategically use public funds to leverage private investment. Green bond and resilience bonds, specifically designed to finance projects that enhance community resilience to climate impact. Debt for climate swap, one instrument being discussed a lot, linking investment in climate adaptation to debt relief. Specific targeted insurance solutions, especially targeting agricultural sector or other sectors to address disasters. Carbon pricing mechanisms that can generate revenue to finance adaptation. And in some cases, especially for the community, which needs specific attentions, crowdfunding or community funding. So this provides a range of approach, a basket of menu of options that can be explored beyond traditional instruments with the view to expand the pool of resources available to finance adaptation on the continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra, for that presentation. And I think what is very interesting is also, the different, I mean, obviously the financing needs, but the different instruments or the different kinds of, sources of finance. I mean, there's a huge range. There is a potential, and, you've actually enumerated, it's a very interesting analysis, but you've enumerated quite a few of the kind of instruments that need to be deployed and need to be developed. And I think that kind of thinking is very, very important for finance, for addressing a lot of those gaps in the huge and considerable deficit of adaptation financing. So I'm going to ask you to stay on, please. And I'm going to ask colleagues who, all participants who are here, to hold their horses and to, either put the questions on the chat, or, we'll have a little time to deal with them before we go to the next speaker, and then we'll sort of take them together. So let me just, without further ado, I think big thanks to Sandra Freitas, and let me turn to our next speaker. It's Matthew Vergestrate, who is from the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. He heads the Infrastructure and Finance and for Resilience Unit, and has over 20 years of experience in financing and infrastructure development. I remember there were some questions around infrastructure, so he might be able to answer some of those. He will be presenting to us the recently published guide for adaptation and resilience finance. So without further ado, Matthew, are you there? And could you please, over to you for your presentation.
Thank you so much, Roini, and a very good morning, good afternoon to everyone. And thanks a lot for inviting me to this webinar, and I found the presentation really fascinating. And so thanks a lot to also the previous speakers. So my topic of the day, and I will share my screen. I hope you will be able to see it. Tell me if that's what you are. If you're seeing my slides. Yes, perfect. Yes. Thank you. So I'm focusing today on and indeed on this guide for adaptation and resilience finance, which is something really that we have worked on together with the private sector, and namely two main organizations called KPMG and Standard Chartered Bank. And so we have not only worked with those two private sector partners, but also with a number of leading financial institutions, MDBs, that are also contributed to this publication. And the idea was really to see, and of course we know there is a huge demand for financing to adaptation and resilience. We know that limited or governments have limited resource. We also know that the private sector is probably not investing enough in this topic. And so how can we address this challenge, and what are the missing pieces to actually mobilize additional financing from the private sector? And just to give you an example, and I think to illustrate that the lack of maybe private finance to adaptation and resilience, some studies were conducted to see, in terms of the green bond market, on the green social and sustainability type of market, which has been increasing exponentially over the last few years. You have about 4 trillion of issuance in those bonds. But only 19% of those bonds have some kind of climate resilience related what called use of proceeds. So basically targeting activities that are contributing to climate resilience and adaptation. So that's clearly not enough, and I think other studies have also shown that the very limited percentage of climate finance is actually coming from the private sector. So what are some of the barriers? And here we're really talking about investment from the banking sector, investing for capital market investors, or like the pension funds, insurance companies that are managing quite a big pool of assets and funding. And what are the reason why they are not actually investing more into this topic? One reason is, for instance, what we've been talking quite a lot with is the short-term bias. So the capital market tends to be oriented short-term, meaning that there are risks that are beyond 5 or 10 years time frame tend to be kind of overlooked. And I think that's, of course, when we talk about climate impact, we are the more you take a long-term perspective, the more you will integrate those risks, and the more you will start pricing them. There is a question about data and indicators we were mentioning, but also data about to really build the case for making informed investment decisions. So having information about country data, or even asset level data like infrastructure data in terms of climate exposure and climate vulnerabilities. I think this is still missing, and that piece of information is needed to inform the decision making. There's also this question about limited revenue streams, and because we talk about avoiding cost and not generating revenue, so which is for private sector perspective can be a bit more challenging. Although if you make, for instance, your energy asset more resilient, of course, it's gonna be you're gonna increase the value of it over time, even if you're not generating immediately new additional revenue, but because you will be saving down the line, and this should be factored into the investment decision. But that's still some of challenge. And then one more challenge is the lack of common market language. And that may seem a bit trivial, but I think for investors it's very important to have clarity on what do we mean by investing in adaptation and resilience. What are the investments that will qualify for that kind of branding or tagging, and it's very important because that creates an understanding, but also create trust and confidence from the investors to actually, if they see an opportunity that is claimed to be adaptation and resilience, they know what it means, and they have trust that is actually making a positive contribution to the agenda. So that's what the guide is really providing. It's creating that kind of guidance on what does that mean to invest in adaptation and resilience from a private sector perspective. And the guide is actually unpacking this agenda into seven broad themes, and you will recognize a lot of them, of course: resilient infrastructure, agri-food system, cities, health, nature and biodiversity, and so on and so forth. So it's also trying to create those kind of big categories, because that also helps people to understand what we mean by those type of investment. And within those themes, there are over 100 investable activities that are that are mentioned, which are that contribute to those to adaptation and resilience, and that start creating that kind of understanding of almost taxonomy or classification of what it means to do adaptation and resilient investment. And there is also include in the publication a list of indicators. So how do you measure the contribution of your investment to the goal of adaptation and resilience? So also tackling a little bit this question of indicators. And so basically the guide provides this kind of framework for an investor to say, okay, is my investment contributing to this agenda? And the first question you have to ask is, does the investment align with one of the themes that we were presenting? Is it making a substantial contribution? Because it's just a marginal contribution, then it should not be qualified. It should actually make a real difference. Then is there a risk for maladaptation or significant harm to other sustainability objectives? And that means, for instance, if you are making a coal-fired power plant more resilient and you're extending the lifetime of that asset by 20 years, maybe it's good from a resilience perspective, but from your climate goals or other sustainability objective, that's creates some negative impact. And so in that case, if there's a potential for maladaptation or significant harm, the guide suggests to do some additional checks. And then the last question, of course, is the investment consistent with the nationally or locally defined adaptation and resilience strategies plan? So of course, there is a need to be aligned with the objective, the country and national objective or the local objective for that investment to be qualified as eligible. And then you can with confidence say this is actually an investment that contributes to these goals. And then what would be the use of that guide? Because I mean, it's good to divide the taxonomy or the language, but then what would be the use case for it? And what we are seeing, and for instance, that's what the reason why Standard Chartered Bank, for instance, was interested in. They want to maybe do kind of credit lines specifically targeting adaptation and resilience. And so they will be financing, for instance, local farmers or others to actually carry out those investments and for that are contributing to climate adaptation and resilience. And now that they have this kind of reference, they can decide what are the investment that they will be financing through this, for instance, through these credit lines. That can also enable, for instance, blended finance instrument that was just referenced. Because if you do, you might say, okay, but maybe the donors is ready, or there's some donors out there that's ready to subsidize part of those investments. And so they can combine, say, okay, well, we're going to subsidize those loans, provided that they're contributing to those activities with a positive impact on adaptation and resilience. In a similar fashion for investors that they're willing to invest in disaster resilience, now they have a standard they can use as a reference that give them confidence that the money was going to be used in a way they align with their objectives. And so they can start asking investment asset manager to create investment fund or product that are specifically targeting those kind of investment. And then also it helps to create some kind of a framework for monitoring or setting some targets in terms of how much investment should be allocated to this priority. Because now you know what you're talking about, you can start measuring, and you can say, well, as a bank or as a pension fund, I want to increase by 20% my allocation to these objectives. And so that again create a kind of an accountability or even a target setting possibility. And then finally, the policymakers and the incentives that I was mentioning, now that can be designed for blended finance and other to be associated with those investments. So that's what this guide is helping, and so I hope you hope it's useful. But and I'm happy to continue the discussion, and feel free to also get on our website to get more additional information on this. But I think there are a lot of discussion going on about adaptation and resilience taxonomy, and I think this guide is really the first one to be as detailed on this topic as it can be. So maybe back to you, Rainy. Thanks a lot for the attention.
Thank you so much, Matthew. That was a very, very interesting presentation and a very interesting guide, because I think this is the kind of area that has to be a lot more further work, by countries in this area. And especially while working, with the private sector or asset managers, etc. I mean, of course, some of the challenges will be in the application of it, but it's a very, very, good approach and framework, to provide and to, in a very systematic way, to look at this issue step by step.
And we actually seeing a lot, maybe just to react quickly on that one, we are seeing, for instance, a lot of countries being interested in using them for their own. So for instance, I think there are discussions in Rwanda, in Brazil, about how this kind of classification could be embedded into the national taxonomies, and for instance, for government to actually start issuing, for instance, resilience bond and accessing capital market financing for adaptation and resilience. They need that kind of classification and taxonomy, and I think that's filling a gap there. But sorry, back to you.
Yes, thank you, Matthew. I think that we also have, I think one of the participants has actually, found the tool very useful. And I think there might be participants who want to actually get your contact. And so, we might sort of put you in touch with people who would like to actually apply that. But I think maybe we're going to take a step back now, because we are sort of at the end of our segment where we have our presenters that have actually, dealt with the issue of finance in the part 2. And then in part 1, we looked at, some of the policy frameworks, etc. So I just want to look at some of our questions that have not been answered, and also encourage, anyone that would like to, maybe like add a question to the chat, or if you would like to raise your hands, you can also sort of come in. I think just to, there was, I think, a question on the, yes, I think that there was a question already on for our Africa presenter for Sandra, but I think Sandra, you've answered that already live on the fiscal revenue mobilization, fiscal policies. So I think that is already answered there. I want to just check if there are other questions that are, that are actually coming to our specific presenters. I think I don't also see a show of hands. I just want to check if there's anyone which has, let me see. I'm just going to give everybody a minute to actually take a moment to reflect on any questions that there may be. Yeah, I think while we are waiting for questions, I think, Matthew, can I ask you one question about the audience of this tool, and which institutions need to work together, on this issue of taxonomy, and also, I mean, on the various steps you outlined. What is the institutional kind of, setting or cooperation that is needed?
No, sure, happy to. I was mentioning, I mean, this is about how to mobilize capital market or bank financing. And so we see an interest for this topic by those players. So as I was mentioning, the big pension fund, the big insurance companies, but also financial regulators at the national level, which are also very keen to tackle this issue and mobilize additional investment in those priorities. So there are, I guess, financial regulators are a key element because they are the ones setting the rules. And then on the use case is really the banking sector in terms of their lending activities, and then the investors community in terms of identifying investment opportunities that are meeting their goals. And so when you look at the list that I was sharing, we have like very, and that includes also the development banks, because for instance, the guide benefit from input from the Asian Development Bank, from other development banks, the OECD, from commercial banks. So there are multiple stakeholders that are interested in this topic, and because this is something, I think there's a gap that people don't recognize needs to be addressed, and so I think that's why the interest is very, very strong, is because no one has really been able to unpack it completely so far. And so I think we're making good steps into that direction with this guide and with some other work that we're working on, for instance, with the Climate Bond Initiative, to name it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Matthew. I think I actually no, so thanks for that. Actually, I wanted to I think maybe ask one final question to Sandra, and then see if there anyone amongst our panelists that would like to share some experiences, or the participants. But I think just maybe a question back to Sandra. Sandra, you have really looked into, in the State of Adaptation Africa report, we looked at a lot of these financial instruments that that need that development. So what sort of enabling support do you think is needed? Or what what can development partners do to support some of the enabling instruments? Or are there certain actions that you think even the governments need to take to actually make some of those innovative sources of finance materialize? Over to you.
Thanks a lot, Rorini. I think from the presentation we hear now from Matthew, it's clear that money is there, right? We do have trillions of USD sitting with some specific actors, institutional investors and others, while we're still talking about challenge of mobilizing resources to actual investment. So there is a paradox, but also a gap there. So everywhere, I think there is an issue of pipeline and deals, right? So I think there is a need to work more, from my perspective, that would be one, on project structuring, so that there could be investment opportunities to be able to match those resources that are available. That would be number one. I feel like there is not a lot of work on developing those pipelines, on developing those deals. That would be one. And second, just like the questions I have been asked, if there is possibility or consideration of fiscal instrument that could be leveraged by government. I think there are rooms to investigate. As I indicated, these are emerging thinking. What we come across was, at best, feasibility study to understand the potential of those instruments. Their implications too, because no one should underestimate implications. They have to be implemented in a careful manner to avoid other impact, social impact especially. So there is more work on these enabling environment regulatory framework, and capacity building in that front will be necessary. A lot has been done already, but I believe we should expect more progress in that direction, so that we can really connect the dots where investment money is and where they are needed in projects. Over.
Thanks, Sandra. Yeah, I think, fully agreed, and thanks for that elaboration. I am still looking at the questions. There is a question, I think, from Chelsea. I just wanted to clarify what that question is, because it's actually for the first two speakers. I'm not sure if we have all the speakers on the call. It could also be the other speakers. I think she's asking. She said she's working on designing methodologies to measure adaptation reach of donor-funded programs across key sectors: agriculture, food security, water security, and health. Do either of the speakers have approaches or methodologies they have successfully used? I was just wondering if we have Chelsea online. Chelsea, could you explain what you mean by adaptation reach? Can you just come in and explain your question, please? Yeah, I think you've raised your hand. Please go ahead and see. Yeah, yes, over to you. Yeah.
Yes. We're looking at ways of shifting away right now from essentially direct head counting. For example, looking at an adaptation program that provides climate information services to farmers and perhaps technical assistance to act on the adaptation, whether that be drought-resistant seeds or efficient irrigation. We know that our programs have a reach outside of the direct beneficiaries we engage with, especially when we do more systems levels engagement. And we're grappling with how best to measure that impact, that reach outside of the direct beneficiaries we work with.
Okay, I see.
Okay, you got it. Great.
Okay, it's on the indirect impact of the program.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Well, this is a very interesting question. I was wondering if there's any speaker. I'm wondering if I could maybe put you, Cornelia, if you're still there on the spot. You know, is there any sort of kind of intention of measuring, you know, at the local level, some of the benefit of the actions or the indirect benefits, or you know, in the new adaptation strategy of Germany that is forthcoming?
So yeah, I just entered the response because I don't have a direct response at the moment. I just can refer maybe to Ewald Vorwart. So I put the link also in my response.
Okay.
I don't know, Chelsea, if you know that community, but it's a community of practitioners, of evaluators who are dealing with especially donor funded programs, and it might be interesting there. So at the moment, I don't have a direct response where I don't have experiences there, but definitely interesting. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much, Cornelia. These are like kind of, I think, quite, challenging questions, and everybody's grappling with them. And I wanted to ask our Moldovan participant, I think, Marina Lungo, if you have any experience on that, in case you're still there with us. Okay. I'm not sure if we have, all the speakers online. So I think, Chelsea, this is a question which maybe it will be very useful to talk to the evaluation and monitoring community further, and we'll sort of, keep that in mind. But I think we've maybe at this point, that's what, we can sort of cover. I think there are some other questions, but I don't know if any of our speakers can answer this, because I think they're a bit beyond the scope of our webinar. One of them is about transboundary climate impacts. Basically, how, what are these programs to address transboundary climate impacts? For example, forest fires in one country affecting the air quality of another country. I just want to give any of our speakers a minute to see if they are actually looking at any transboundary programs. I'm wondering, Sandra, if I could turn to you. I mean, the African continent, there's a lot of transboundary action. Are you, do you have any insight on this aspect of programs that are really looking at these, sort of, how, an issue in one country like forest fires affecting air quality of another country? Any insights on the potential for transboundary programming?
Well, I'm aware of more policy at Pan-African or sub-regional level regarding this issue, but actual program, I don't have anyone that can in my mind. In other sector, yes, like water or others, but in this specific one, beyond policy, I don't think of any specific program.
Okay, no, thank you. Actually, I think traditionally the transboundary water resources are an area of cooperation, as you mentioned, but maybe not on this particular topic. So I think maybe with that, we are coming to the end of this webinar. We're going to actually, at the end of the webinar, we will have a survey, and we would request that participants can perhaps fill that survey when we close. But I think I just want to really give a huge, thank you to all our speakers, which have shared their country experiences. Our speaker from Moldova and from Germany, I think some great presentations there. and our speaker for the adaptation State of Adaptation Africa report, and our speaker from UNDRR. I mean, thank you so much for really sharing your valuable time and insights, and also responding to the questions. We have had very few drops in this participation. I think I've seen that most of the participants have stayed, and others have asked us for recordings for those who are not attending. And I think that there are many more questions here which are even broader than this webinar. So, you know, we try to keep track of them and to see if they can be addressed in future webinars. So just a massive thanks to everyone for staying engaged with us. I think maybe with that, we are going to close this. And we look forward to having you join us for any of the future webinars that we are planning this year. We don't do them very often. But we believe that they're really enriching for our participants, and especially because so many of our speakers come from countries that are really working on the ground and are sharing those experiences. So I think with that, a very big thank you to everyone, and we are now going to officially close the webinar. Bye-bye.